member of the Right On Door County Teen Advisory Council. I'm here to introduce Kao Kalia Yang, and she has wrote The Latehomecomer, a long memoir, and also The Song Poet. I loved reading The Latehomecomer because it talks about a part of the Vietnam War that we don't really know about. When you think of the Vietnamese War, you think of Vietnam and you think of America. You don't really think of the Hmong and how they may not be a country, but they still are a society. And so I hope you all can read it. If you have any questions about Right On Door County or the council, just come to me or Jared. And now, please.
Going to come way down to where I am. Hi. I'm going to do a little bit of a reading from my book. How many of you have never read my work before? Show me your hands, I know. Okay. So, a few chapters. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book and then we'll open up for a conversation. That's what we're going to have today. I'm not going to speak at you. I'm going to be talking with you. So your questions are going to determine our time together. Does that sound fair? And then if at any point I'm boring, you have to raise your hand and tell me so. And then you have to have a suggestion on how we can make this more interesting. That's the only thing I ask. But you're my last event on this visit, so I want to give you all everything I have. I want to make this good. I wrote this book as a 22-year-old. My grandmother had died, and she never learned how to read or write. Her biggest fear was that she would be forgotten. And so I wrote this book in an effort to remember her, in the hopes that the wide world would remember her with me, Julie. So the book is written for Julie, who never learned how to write, to my baby brother Maxwell Huya, who will read the things that she never wrote. It begins with an epigraph. Before babies are born, they live in the sky where they fly among the clouds. The sky is a happy place, and calling babies down to earth is not an easy thing to do. From the sky, babies can see the course of human lives. This is what the Hmong children of my generation are told by our mothers and fathers, by our grandmothers and our grandfathers. They teach us that we have chosen our lives, that the people who we would become, we had inside of us from the beginning, and that people whose worlds we share, whose memories we hold strong inside of us, we have always known. From the sky, I would come again. I began the book this way because a long time ago, I was your age, and my family was poor. We lived on the east side of St. Paul in a 900 square feet home. The walls were heavy with mold, and no matter how many layers of paint my father applied, every winter the mold would grow back wild as it was. In this place that we were born at this time, in our lives, my mom and dad worked the night shift so that my brothers and sisters and I, we could have them during the day. And then, so they were always gone. But after school, we come home and we take care of our younger brothers and sisters so that mom and dad could go to work. One day, Titanic was on the theater. Have you all seen Titanic? Titanic, yeah. And I really wanted to see Titanic because we didn't grow up with cable. We didn't grow up with cable television, and so every night at 6:30, Entertainment Tonight would have some kind of special on Leonardo DiCaprio. So I was in love, and I wanted naturally to go to the theater to see this movie. But we couldn't afford the movie theaters, and so one day I knew all my friends were going to go after school, but I had to come home to take care of the younger kids. And as I'm walking home, all I felt was the weight of the books in my bag. I got back and my dad was tying his shoes, safety toe boots, getting ready to go to the factory. I put my books down in front of him and I made a lot of noise. I slapped them on the ground. So my dad looked up. I looked at him and I told him, Daddy, this is not the life that I wanted for me. I wanted something better. I wanted something more. I was tired of being poor. I was tired of living in a country where I had to imagine the insides of a movie theater to be normal. And my father looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the liquid in his eyes, and I thought my father was going to cry. And I didn't have the words prepared. I didn't have any other words prepared, and so I just looked at him. And my dad got up, As he's walking to the door, to the car, he stops and he looks back at me and he says, "Menai, life is going to teach you the strength of the human heart, not of its weakness or fragility." My father left. He said that if he had a choice, if he could choose all over again, he would choose me. Many, many years later, I'm going to Columbia University. I'm a kid from the projects of St. Paul. We don't dream of schools like Columbia University. Right? It's one of the Ivy Leagues, the ones that you see on TV. And I say that I'm going to be a writer for my people who believed, we still believe that we needed doctors and lawyers. I said I was going to be a writer and I was going to put our stories into the bookshelves of a bigger world so that boys and girls all across this country and all around the world could read and learn from the people who loved me. This is my way of telling my father that from the sky I would come again. If I had another choice, I would choose him and my mother all over again. I'm going to read to you from the prologue. In Ban Vinai refugee camp, Loi province, Thailand, December of 1980 to January of 1987. From the day she was born, she was taught that she was Hmong by the adults around her. As a baby learning to talk, her mother and father often asked, "What are you?" And the right answer was always, "I am Hmong." It wasn't a name or a gender, it was a people. When she noticed that they lived in a place that felt like it had an invisible fence made of men with guns, who spoke Thai and dressed in the colors of old rotting leaves, she learned that Hmong meant contained. The first time she looked into the mirror and noticed her brown eyes, her dark hair and the tinted yellow of her skin, she saw Hmong looking at her. Hmong that could fit in all of Asia, Hmong that was only skin deep. In Latehomecomer transition camp to America, Chonburi province, Thailand, January of 1987 to July of 1987. The feeling that she was Hmong did not happen until the preparations for America began, as their family was being processed. Thailand wanted to close its refugee camps, send away the remnants from the war. You're going to America on a one-way ticket. You're going to America as refugees of the Vietnam War. You're going to America as Hmong from the camps of Thailand. You're going to America to find a new home. We do not want you here anymore. All this was said in the things that were happening, the classes that her mother and father attended that taught them new strings of words. Hello, how are you? I am fine, thank you. New kinds of food, pieces of chicken between bread with cilantro and green onion, and a white, tasteless, fatty spread from a jar. The free set of clothing that each person was given, a dark blue sweater, walking shoes with laces, white socks, dark blue pants, a white collared shirt to go underneath the sweater. These were the Thai government's last gift to the Hmong for leaving their country. The American government's donation to a people who had passed exams stating that they had fought under American leadership and influence during the secret war in Laos from 1960 to 1975. All this was felt as she watched the preoccupied adults around her preparing for a new life, trying to end the yearning for an old one that she didn't know. She saw how their eyes searched the distance for the shadows of the mountains, or the wide open sky for the monsoons, one last time before it was gone forever. All these goodbyes made her feel very Hmong inside. She had heard stories of how Hmong people did not have a country, how we always had to leave places behind. First China, because the Chinese didn't want us on their land, how they took away our written language, and how they tried to turn us into slaves. And so we spoke our fears to our ancestors and made our way to Laos. When the French came to Laos, they climbed the high mountains and they saw the cool of the land. They wanted opium for tax money. We fought them, but lost. When they left, they had learned that we would keep fighting, and they told the Americans so. The American pilots dropped furs from the sky, injured and scared, into the Hmong villages on Pumbia Mountain, and we helped them get better again in the depths of the jungle. By the time their leaders came with the guns, there were Hmong people who had seen enough Americans to trust in an idea of democracy, a place where we could live with others as if we belonged, a promise of home. Those who believed took up guns. Those who were only still struggling with their lives saw guns pointed at them. The explosion of flesh, the falling down of heavy bodies to the ground, wet blood soaking the dark of the earth. The North Vietnamese soldiers and the Communist Pathet Lao soldiers could not and would not tell the difference. Hmong was only skin deep. Skin is easy to penetrate. When the Americans left Laos in 1975, they took the most influential, the biggest believers and fighters for democracy with them, and they left my family and thousands of others behind, to wait for a fight that would end for so many in death. A third of the Hmong died in the war with the Americans. Another third were slaughtered in its aftermath. From the clouds, the little girl's spirit watched her family escape into the Laotian jungle, run around in circles for 4 years, and then surface on the banks of the Mekong River in Thailand, starving survivors. Her spirit came to them in Ban Vinai refugee camp. Then her spirit and her body left Thailand, just as the Hmong had left so many other countries. In St. Paul, Minnesota, the United States of America, July 1987 to today. What is Hmong? Where is your country? What are you doing here in America? Are you ever going home again? In the beginning, she did not have the words to say anything. Later, she didn't know what to say. Eventually, she would learn to say, Hmong is an ethnic minority. We don't have a country. We're here looking for a home. For many years, the Hmong inside the little girl fell into silence. And then one day, the little girl grew up into a young woman. Because she hadn't said very much in her first 20 years, all of the words had been stored inside her. Because her people had only been reunited with a written language in the 1950s, in the break of a war without a name, they had not had the opportunity to write their stories down. In the books on the American shelves, the young woman noticed how Hmong was not a footnote in the history of the world, how Vietnam was only Vietnamese, how Laos belonged to the Laotians, and how the war was only American. She saw how the world only knew skin deep the reaches of Hmong. She saw how they did not know that from the day she was born, she was Hmong. She saw how the children born in America lived life like Americans. She saw the diminishing memories of her mother and father on the hard road to remembering the strings of words and the new food in America. She said goodbye to her grandmother from Laos, from Thailand, from America, from the world of the living. And on sheets of white paper, the young woman slowly unleashed the flood of Hmong into language, seeking refuge not for a name or a gender, but a people. That's the beginning of my book. That is why I'm here before you today. Growing up, people used to ask me what I was. At first, I didn't know enough English, and then when I did, I couldn't find anything with Hmong in it in the bookshelves, in all of the libraries, in all of the schools that I went to. I remember going to the bookmobile that used to come to the housing project where I lived, and I would climb that hill with my sister every week. And we'd go, and one day I asked the librarian, after a whole season of hoping to build the nerves, I asked her, do you have a book about people like me? She was this nice woman. She went to the bookshelves and she looked, and then she came back with a book about the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Japanese. And she said, this is the best I can do. We don't have any books about Hmong kids. And she remembers, because I'm still relatively young, and I remember me saying underneath my breath, one day a little girl like me is going to come in here and she's going to find a book about the people who love her. When I said those words, those many years ago, I had no idea that writer would be me. But if you ask me as early as 10 years ago if I would ever stand in a high school in Wisconsin speaking to students like all of you, I would have said no. No way. I didn't even talk anyway. I was a selective mute. Because I could never find enough English words in time for my listeners, you know. People are impatient when you're new to a language. They don't have much time to wait for you. And you can see it in the tapping of their feet, the tapping of their fingers. So I never thought I would be in a position like this. But here I am. I'm here for you. I'm a writer. I'm a writer writing the books and the stories that have built me, putting forth into the world everything that I believe in, about a bigger world, a better world, about how good we can be to each other when we try hard enough, when we love hard enough. So I don't have a speech plan. I don't want to come here with all these words I've already thought of and read them at you. I came in here bravely. I came in here to meet you and your thoughts. And I was delighted when I saw the welcome sign, and I'm looking at a thank you sign. And you're not going to thank me for nothing. If you're going to thank me, this hour that you have with me is going to mean something for you. So I want you to talk to me. It takes a break first. You can ask me anything at all you want to know about writing, about being Hmong, about life, and I'll give you the best of what I have. I'll give you my words. And if I don't speak, if I don't say something that you're dying to hear, now's your chance. So please, talk to me. Give me a chance. Ask me what you want to know. Tell me what you're curious about. Because let me speak for all of the teachers in this room. No matter how good we are, no matter how hard we work, we cannot speak to what you need to learn. We cannot tell you what you need to know. Learning is a partnership. Every teacher can always only be with you on the journey that you're on. We don't get to drive that ship. We don't get to see how far your vessel is going to go. So please talk to me. Who wants to be the brave first? Right here. Yes. What's your name?
I'm Madeline.
Madeline?
Who or what inspired you to share your stories?
Who or what inspired me? You know, my first book started as a love letter. The Latehomecomer was a love letter to my grandma. And I said she was this old woman who couldn't read or write. She'd never been to school, my grandma. My grandpa died when her youngest, my father, was just 2 years old. And so she took to the fields with a garden hoe the size of my hand to feed 9 kids, to raise them to become young men and young women. In a war where so many of the young were dying, my grandmother, an old woman, walked through it. You know, she was this incredible human being. And she loved me so much. By the time I came along, my grandma had close to 100 grandkids. So she was really, really experienced. And she had this single tooth. And I remember I really wanted braces when I was younger. Because all of the kids I went to school with had braces. And because Pamela Anderson had beautiful teeth. So I used to ask my mom and dad, can I get braces? Can I get braces? And my mom and dad, instead of just telling me, we don't have the money and you're just never going to get braces, they'd say, maybe next year. Maybe next year. And finally one day I was asking and my grandma looked at me and she said, Menai, is my smile not beautiful? With her single tooth. You know, her tooth had grown so long that no dentist in America wanted to create dentures for her unless they could take it out. And my grandma, she was so stubborn, she said, this is the only thing standing in this mouth that my mother and my father gave me. I want to keep it. And so, you know, that single tooth, we took down Jolly Ranchers, ice cubes, gnawed on bones. Whenever I offered her anything, my grandma never said no. You know, my grandma, who was incredible because one of her earlobes was torn. When she was a little girl, she had gone gathering bamboo shoots in the jungle, and a great tiger had come running. And with her baby sister on her back, somehow she survived the run. But in the process, her earring, she was wearing hoops, her earring got tangled in a tree branch, and her earlobe was torn. So growing up, my grandma always said, Menai, you know what the most beautiful part of you is? You know, at school, your teachers want you to tell them that you think your eyes are beautiful or your hair or something. But I've always known in my heart that it was my ears, because my grandma said I had the most beautiful ears in the world. And I do, people. You're not going to get ears like this easily. I have good enough ears to be an ear model. Who's an ear, okay? You know, but my grandma used to touch my ears and tell me, and I your ears. Because that is how all of the words that I have for you, that's how they get inside your heart. And so when my grandma died, I was just writing a love letter to her to tell her that I wouldn't forget her. Even though she couldn't read or write, that I would never forget her. But that letter it grew and grew, and I was on page 37. And my dad said, Menai, what are you doing? And I said, Daddy, I'm writing a love letter to my grandma. He said, why is it so long? I'm like, because I have a lot to say. There's a lot I want to remember about her. And he says, if you dream in the right direction, the dream never dies. The dreamer never wakes up. The dream always grows bigger. And so the seeds were planted. I wanted to become a writer so the world could love her along with me. So all of you who will never get to meet Jolie can learn something about the wisdom of her life. So that was my first reason. But you know, everything good that you want to do, everything hard that you ever want to accomplish, it begins with love. It takes, in this country, it takes an average of 5 years to write a book. That's like a high school education in some. It is like a college education in some. It is a feat of love. That is all that it ever takes to do anything in this world. You gotta love someone, you gotta love something. And if that isn't the reason why you're doing something, then that thing isn't going to stick. That has always been the reason why. That was the reason why the Hmong survived the war, you know. When the biggest military force in the world came to the high mountains of Laos, and Laos became the most heavily bombed nation the world has ever seen, we'll never learn of. The Hmong, this tiny farming population, we were able to survive because of love. Because my grandma loved her 9 children. Because those 9 children loved their children. That's the only reason we're ever able to do anything in this world. Wow. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you for being the brave first. Right here, yes.
Me?
Yes, you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What was your father like?
My father, what is he like? He's still alive.
Oh.
He is my father has type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. A lot of American vets who were exposed to Agent Orange have these conditions. It's not a unique condition. But my father and Hmong men, despite having been a part of the war, are not considered veterans in the United States, so they don't get VA benefits or anything. So my father's living with all of these conditions. There are good days and there are bad days. My father has worked beside the tall machines all of his life in America, first as an assembler and then as a machinist. So my father has incredibly rough hands. Hands that have been cut so many times and healed so many times that when they touch you, they hurt. No matter how much lotion you apply, my father's hands are really rough. I don't know how many of you have fathers and mothers with really rough hands. But when I see that in a picture, when I meet that in life, I inherently think of my dad. My dad's a beautiful song poet in the Hmong tradition. So he'll say things like, "Oh, Menai, the cloud flowers are blossoming in the cloud sky today." And he'll make you look up and at skies that you think were uninteresting and see new things, new life happening in them all the time. My father is an incredible man because not only because he raised me, but because he's always taught me. In the camp where I was born in a refugee camp. Young girls like me were stolen all the time. And so I could only play as far as the stretch of my mother's skirt. Sometimes people would come with fish sauce and barter them for little girls like me. And I was a cute little girl. And so I always sat on my father's shoulders. They were so scared that anyone would take me. So I only knew the world from his shoulders, We would see puppies and their eyes would be closed. And my dad would say, "Menai, their eyes are closed because your world is so bright." There I was, this kid in this place where Hmong people only got food 3 days a week, where all of these adults are killing themselves every single day because they were suffering from post-traumatic war syndrome, PTSD. They were killing themselves. Suicide was the #1 cause of death. My dad would tell me about how I was so much more than poverty, so much more than despair. He'd tell me that I was a captive to a more beautiful future. He used to hold my hand and tell me the size of your hand and your feet, these things will not determine your life journey, Minai. That's my dad. Before anybody believed that I would ever be anything but a hungry little kid in a refugee camp, my father told me that I was beautiful. When I was a teenager and I thought I wasn't smart enough to become this person that he had hoped for me, to become an educated person, whatever that meant, my father told me that I was the best thing he had produced, the best thing he knew, the best person to walk into the future. That if I didn't, then everything that he had been, everything that he was would have all died. He would have no chance in this game we call life. That's my dad. He's a dreamer. My dad is a dreamer. And because his father died when he was just 2 years old, he never had a father. So he is the father that he imagined for himself. He says, at his best and at his worst, he's nothing more than the father he imagined for himself. So I belong to just a poor man, but he's an imaginary father. And it is from his shoulders that I first saw the world. It is on them still that I stand. Because when I get home, he calls and he says, "How did it go in Wisconsin? Did the kids get something from you? Did you say something important?" And I'll say, "Dad, I don't know." And then he'll push me. He'll say, "What did you talk about?" That's my dad. He cares about my story. He cares about every road that I go on. He wants to make sure that I'm safe. And even when he isn't there with me, his words guide me. His heart pushes me forward. That's my dad. But lots of times people have looked at him and they've told him, "What are you doing here in America? You're doing nothing but slowing us down." Many, many times, because my father doesn't speak English well. Because he's worked with the machines all his life. He had carpal tunnel in both hands. And so my father, it's very hard for him to pick up coins if he drops them on the floor. And so a lot of people think my dad is stupider than he is. A lot of people think that my father is nothing more than a weight on the soil of America. And they've not been afraid to tell him this to his face and to my face. They don't know how deep his heart, how strong his love, how noble his intentions are. So yeah, you don't get to meet my dad today, but through my words, you get to see him. Yes, right here.
Did your parents fully support
journey you took with him?
Did my parents fully support the journey I've taken with my life? You know, I'm very persistent. My dad says that I'm like the dog after the scent of a bone. I don't know when to let go. And I don't. I'm very persistent. You know? So when I told them that I wanted to become a writer, I thought they were going to be very disappointed because they needed doctors and lawyers. And clearly they needed doctors. Every adult in my life, once they take off their pants, once they take off their shirts, you see the scars of the war all over them. One of my uncles cannot wear boots in wintertime, no matter how cold it gets, because there's shrapnel embedded in his foot. You know, we needed doctors. My older sister said she was going to be a lawyer, so I was always supposed to be the doctor. But I remember very clearly being 22 and wanting to go to writing school, and I told my mom and dad, I said, "Daddy, I'm going to become a doctor, and not a doctor. I'm going to become a writer." And I thought my mom and dad were going to be so angry. I thought they were going to be so disappointed. But my father said to me, he said, "If the sky that I live under can fall on me, if the earth that I walk on can throw me off, who am I to stand in your way?" And then my mother said, "You've always loved stories." The thing about life is this: when you're young, you don't know, but who we are is not such a surprise for our parents. We are some variety, some version of their imaginary hopes and dreams. We're not that much of a surprise. And my parents knew above and beyond anything whatever I said I would be. They knew that I wouldn't chase it until the road ended for me. So they believed in that part of me. You know, the reality is that people only understand what you allow them to understand. Right? If you love something and you allow the people in your life to see that love, once that love blooms into something, they won't be surprised by it. I had this friend who was secretly in love with her boyfriend for years, and then when she wanted to marry him, she told her parents, and they were so mad at her. You know, and she couldn't understand why they were so mad, but I could see it from the outside. She told me how she was feeling about him, but she never told them. So they were surprised, and she was young, and they envisioned that she would go on a different journey and live a certain life. Because she never told them that she wanted to be with this boy who said school wasn't for him. If you give the people in your life the pieces they need in order to understand you, in order to support you, you'll be fine. The challenge is that sometimes it's so hard for us to get those words out. But part of my life has always been about living very transparently. Even today, before you, I want to live very transparently. Because I'm so tired of living without understanding on my side. I'm so tired of all the people who used to laugh at my uncle and I when we walked to Kmart because it was cold out and he wore flip-flops because that's the only thing he could wear. But people thought he was crazy. People wondered if he could feel the cold biting through his skin. Of course he can. Of course. But until I tell you, you won't ever know why there'd be a Hmong man in St. Paul, Minnesota, walking in the depths of winter with flip-flops on. You will never know and you will never understand. And so for me, part of my work and part of my life is about turning on the light in the dark rooms that keep us away from each other as human beings. And the two people, above and beyond anyone else, who've always looked to see where I was situated, even in my darkest moments, were my mom and my dad. So they've always supported me. And in the end, I know even if I don't become as fine of a writer as I like to be, I know that they would know that I tried my very best and it would be an honorable demise. I trust in that. Yes, right here.
So in English class, we read the first chapter of your book, and you were describing your mother and father when they met. How did you go about finding out that situation?
It's a great question. So I was born in a refugee camp, and I couldn't go to school because I couldn't do this, and I couldn't do this, and the schools were overcrowded already. There was 40,000 people living on 400 acres. Right, visualize, less than a square mile in radius. We were living on top of each other. We got food 3 days out of a week. There weren't enough spaces in school for all the kids to go. So that was a measure of your maturity. And so because I couldn't go to school, I sit with the adults. And they didn't have any books to open up for me. There was no TV they could turn on, so they would tell me stories. So my mom would tell me about when she first met my dad, and my dad would tell me about the first time he met my mom. So I have all these stories inside of me. The beauty of writing is that I get to upload it into something other than this brain that I know will change in time. And there have been many, many instances where our brains start forgetting, right? You know, dementia, you know, all of these dangers that are there. And so with writing, I get to write these things down. I get to keep them somewhere beyond me. It is like an insurance net for the memories that I hold. But I've always known the stories. And I know what my mom looked like. She was only 19 when I was born. So even when I was 6, my mom was 25. She was incredibly young and incredibly beautiful. And my dad still had a head full of dark hair then. You know, I have very clear memories of my mom and dad as young people because I had young parents. Very different from my younger brothers and sisters who saw mom and dad only as 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds. And so it's just a process of putting it down. Yes?
Was it difficult for you having to be the mature one in your family as a young kid?
My older sister is more mature than I am. I have an older sister, Dao, and she's a bit bossy. She has an answer for everything. There's never been a question I've asked her where she hasn't had some kind of answer to offer me. I never spoke English, and I didn't speak English well. In English, my words are choppy. They don't sound good to my ears. So for a long time, I didn't talk at all, and it was always Dao. At parent-teacher conferences, she was always the one interpreting. She was always the one speaking on all of our behalf. I remember she was only in 3rd grade when she wrote out my dad's resume, and she said, she wrote on top, in very careful letters, she said, if you hire me, I will do my very best for you because I have children to feed. And she interpreted it for my dad, and she was sitting, I have such a clear memory, her legs were swinging on the chair because they were too short, they didn't touch the ground. And my dad said, maybe that's too show-offy, because I don't know if I could do my best. And Dao says, in America, Daddy, you have to say this, otherwise you won't get a job. You know, she was always the one who took the bullets first. Whenever anybody hit me, I remember being 7th grade, it was a really hot day and I get motion sickness. So I cracked open the bus window, but there were these big girls who didn't want anyone to open the window. And when they saw that my window was open, they came by and they said, who did it? And she was sitting beside me. She raised her hand and they knuckled her on the head. She has always taken the blows for me. You know, I know that, well, my husband's here. I have a husband. But I know that I have more than one life partner. When Aaron is gone, Dao will still be my life partner. She will still have seen more of my life than anybody else. That's the gift of having brothers and sisters. She remembers what it was like when it was dark and we had to take care of the kids late at night and we were scared but mom and dad were at work. You know, she remembers when somebody this guy tried to open our door and break in. We lived in this really bad neighborhood. And she remembers how he tried to cut his hands with bread knives. She remembers these things with me in a way that Aaron will never remember. The beating heart of us, how we bit and we clawed at that hand so that it would come inside and hurt our younger brothers and sisters. We have gone through so much together. And everything hard, she hit her first. You know, she used to tell me that life is like a ladder. She's going to be the first here, so I'd be the second. So she stayed at Hamlin so that I could go to Carleton, right? One of the best liberal arts colleges in the nation. She stayed at Hamlin Law School so that I could go to Columbia University in New York City. She became a lawyer so I could become a writer. In the very beginnings, when I was fighting to finish this book, it was her lawyering. She would sell her skills so that I could hide and write this book. She is, I don't know where I would be without my sister. When I died and I came back to life and my husband was terrified and my babies were in the NICU and I was very afraid, it was the hold of her hand, her tiny little hand in my own, that gave me the strength to stand. Not because I didn't think that she would be able to hold me if I fall, but because I knew that even when I was on the ground, she would still be there urging me forward. I have an incredible big sister. It would be a complete lie if I tell you today that I was always the first or the most responsible. She teaches me how to love better and deeper every single day. Not just me, but our parents who are aging, our younger siblings who are making their own decisions and trying to find their ways into life. Dao has a very patient love. I'm very short-tempered. Like if you all start talking, I'll tell you, I can hear you. If you can hear me, I can hear you. You know, if somebody falls asleep, I'll say, wake that person up for me. I'm very impatient. Dao is very patient, you know, and that's my big sister. So I'm not the responsible one. Right now I'm here. Who's at home checking on my kids? She is. You know? Yes.
Can you tell us a little more about your younger siblings?
I can. I have a 14-year-old brother who's very curious about high school right now, Max. And then I have 3 sisters. There's Shal, she's at Stanford University, trying to finish up her degree this June. There's Taylor, who's at Columbia University, getting her Master's of Social Work. And then there's Shilu, who's very confused about where she wants to go next. And there's Sue, who, if anybody has read the song poet in this room, I write about his story in the song poet. I'll tell you about him. He's got really round eyes, and he had really spiky hair as a little kid. My mom has 6 miscarriages after me, all little boys, so he was our firstborn in America child, the one that could come when all of these couldn't come. We have always loved him tremendously, but because he was the boy that my mom and dad had been waiting for, he was born with a lot of responsibilities. Like when he was 4 or 5, he just started school, he lost the key one day, and my dad said, now that you've lost the key, who's going to take care of your sisters? And I remembered Sue sitting by the door, trying to keep us safe, and he would not go to bed because he was scared that should anybody come in, that he would protect all of us. You know, Sue, who when he was in 9th grade, we moved to this part of Minnesota where there weren't any Hmong people at all. So we grown up in St. Paul, and there's a lot of Hmong people in St. Paul. When we went to Andover, Minnesota, he became the first Hmong boy in the school. The very first day of class, in shop class, these boys, they started shaking the shop table. Sue was trying to put something together, and he told them to stop, but they wouldn't. And then they started laughing at him and pretending they were speaking some kind of Asian language. And then they told him to go home. And Sue had the nuts and bolts in his hand. He threw them, and so he was suspended. When Sue returned to school a week later, the very same boys surrounded him in a dark hallway. And he pulled the first punch, so he was suspended again. Sue has had a very hard time trying to find a place in the world that we belong to. Every time he got into a fight, my mom and dad yelled at him. They told him that they had not come so much death, so much war, to raise a son who would fight with his hands when he had a mouth and a mind. And so my brother Sue dropped out of high school in his senior year. In Andover at that time, there were all of these suicides, and it's in like the Rolling Stone magazines and other magazines now. But all of these kids were killing themselves. A lot of them were LGBTQ kids they had this don't ask, don't tell policy. And it doesn't matter what happens or how you're provoked. If you're the first one to pull the punch, and you're the one who must suffer the consequences. And so all these kids were killing themselves. And one day, Sue said if he went back to school, he would die. So he stopped going. And my parents got very mad at him. And he lost himself, I think, because the world that we were living in couldn't imagine a future for him. And so he couldn't find a way out. So right now, he's 28, and he's still trying to find a way, trying to learn how to love himself. He's alive because we all love him. He knows this, but he's trying to learn how to love himself. And that's sometimes the hardest thing to do of all. He has a house full of sisters. And we are each other's support systems. But he can't always tell us what's bothering him in his heart, all the sadnesses that he feels, so he carries and carries and carries. So he is, in many ways, he's the reason why I'm here as well. You know, people ask me all the time, aren't you the American dream? You take your kid from the refugee camps, you raise her in the projects, you give her one of the best education that money can buy, a microphone. Aren't you the American dream? And when I was a very young writer, it was very easy for me to believe. But today, I don't believe that. I cannot believe that. Because if the American dream is real for me, why can't it be real for my brother? He is as smart as I am. He has a bigger heart than I. As a little kid, he would never finish an egg roll. He'd save half for me. I finished many an egg roll by myself. He is an incredibly generous, loving person. But in so many ways, he's been beaten down so hard. So there are 7 of us, and we're this team in the world. And then we have our weak moments and our strong moments, but we keep on pulling each other along. They're my best friends. And sometimes they're the most annoying people in my life. They keep me humble, though. They tell me that I have a funny sounding voice. And they tell me that sometimes, although my eyes aren't crying, my voice is crying. And they tell me that in a room full of students like this, none of you are going to tell me that my books suck, and you're not going to tell me what I can do to do a better job. They keep me humble in very real ways. Right here, yes.
Was it difficult to tell your people's story?
Was it difficult to tell my people's story? The telling wasn't difficult. The publishing road has been difficult. I love to write. I've always loved to write. And so the writing for me is fun. I don't know how to dance, but I imagine that when I'm really writing, it's like when you're dancing. You hear music, you know the lay of the floor, and you're just moving along, and time kind of stands still. So the telling itself wasn't challenging. But when the book first came out, it was, because Barnes & Noble and Borders didn't want to have it in store. They said that they didn't know if anybody would buy it. There was a lot of teachers who taught children like me, a lot of book groups that read the book, and then they went to the bookstores and they asked for it in-house. When you're a young writer, you don't make a lot of money. I'm going to tell you all the truth. I sold this book, 4 years of work, for $3,500. Do the math. This is pennies and dimes, okay? So it's hard to make a life as a writer. And when people would invite me to speak initially, nobody would come. I remember driving all the way from St. Paul to Madison because this one feminist bookstore had invited me. It was Mother's Day, and I sat there and I read to one person, my mother. Nobody else was there. Not even the clerk in the store came, and it was the hardest reading of my life. I've been to lots of high schools and other places where people have told me to go home. Just this fall, a woman told me that she'd come to see an American writer, not someone like me. So it's hard to go into the world believing in the very best and sometimes meeting so much resistance. Or what's worse, people who tell me, oh, you're so much better than I thought. Why? Why did you think I wouldn't be good? If you're going to go see, who's a very famous person? I love Anthony Bourdain. I like cooking shows. I think he's going to be amazing. And then afterward, if he isn't that amazing, I get a little bit disappointed. I've never gone to a talk and thought that the speaker wasn't going to be worth my time. But so often people have told me that. It's hard to be an American writer and not look like what so many picture an American writer would look like, not sound like what so many people imagine an American writer would sound like. That has been the hardest part of all. Fighting for the respect of a community that you want to love, that you love deeply, and you think should love you, that's been hard. But my daddy and my mommy, they've always said, you're not going to become who you are because of the easy things. It is the hard things that make you who you are. If I haven't gone through so much shit, I wouldn't be here before you. I wouldn't have the confidence or the courage to believe that I had anything of worth to contribute to who you are. To take an hour from 200 students' lives is a long time. When I write books, I kill trees, right? I kill trees. You need trees to make paper. When I'm speaking like this, whether you like it or not, it is an hour of your life that you are sharing with me. For the next 20 years, 40 years, if you hear my name again, you will remember that you met me today, that there was an hour that we spent together. Even if you meet a more fashionable version of me, an older and wiser version of me, who I am today, I've written into your memory, whether you like it or not. That's responsibility. Does that make sense? Yes?
When did you decide to write your memoir?
I was 22 when I started it. But I was in 7th grade when I thought that when I wrote down how does a writer become. And I pressed so hard that I destroyed the page of my journal. I wrote on the second page, she keeps on writing, period. 7th grade. If you ask me why I'm a writer, I can give you a different reason every day. That's why I stand a chance of becoming good at what I do. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, a firefighter. It doesn't matter what you choose to be. If you can find one good reason to be that a day, you will be that much better at your job. And so many people think that you become these things only when you have a certain degree or you get a certain title. But who we are, there was no application date. And retirement, that's artificial. You are who you are until you take your last breath, until you die. A teacher is a teacher is a teacher until they die. A mother is a mother until they die. Not when their child dies. I've met a lot of men and women who have children who die on them. You don't stop becoming a mother because your child is no more. It is when you go that you take that with you. So I was a writer in the 7th grade. I was a writer at 22. I'm a writer today. Even if I never publish another book, I will be a writer until the day I die. That's the way life works. That's the way memory works. Make sense? If I'm saying things that aren't making sense, you should let me know. And if you're talking because this is boring, you should give me an opportunity to talk to you. So you should raise your hand and be brave enough to ask me what would hold your attention. Okay? That's the deal. That's the way it works. Yes?
Have you found that over time, the Hmong culture has been more accepted in the society, or do you still feel a lot of discrimination?
I have to be very honest with you. With our current administration, it's been very hard for the people I love. It's been very hard for me. And I think it's not just the Hmong people. I think it's all marginalized people. It's been hard. I wish I could tell you differently, but I would be lying to you. I was a college student and then I became a college professor, and the problems that I encounter as a student are the exact same problems that my students are encountering today. I would be lying if I said any other thing. Yes?
What were your experiences at Columbia like?
What were my experiences at Columbia like? That's a good question. So I'd only ever seen New York from TV. We didn't have any money for me to visit when I got into the school. So the first time I went was the first time I went. To get to New York City, you kind of this highway takes you through a cemetery. So it's almost like you're going through this land of the dead to enter into this concrete capital, right? It's very intimidating. I kept on noticing how many pigeons they did have all their toes. And everywhere I went, I looked for rats, and there are rats everywhere, in the trash cans at night. It's getting better, but it's, they're there. It was in so many ways a brand new world for me. I grew up in St. Paul, where most people knew who the Hmong were. In Minnesota, Wisconsin, and California, people knew who the Hmong were. At Columbia University, people thought I was Korean. They thought I was Chinese. They thought I was Thai. I have a face that belongs to all of Asia. And so sometimes when I looked in the mirror, I was the only Hmong person looking at me. So I had to remember. And when people ask, what are you? I'd have to tell them. Every time I'd have to tell them. I got a lot of practice identifying myself to a bigger world in New York. But New York is also cool. There's so many different types of people. So I was never the most fashionable, but I was never the least fashionable. I was always the shortest consistently. But it's such a diverse place. You hear so many languages on the screens, so many languages on the streets. And I'm just one language, but there was just no one to talk to me in Hmong. So it was lonely for me. But New York gave me the distance that I needed away from my family and away from the daily demands of our lives. Gave me the freedom to write. In New York, I could go to every big writer came through New York eventually. And if you're a student, you can go for free a lot of the times. So I heard so many different readers. And I would say, oh, I really like the way she reads. Maybe I could read like her. So I practiced. It didn't work out. I would practice somebody else. It didn't work out. New York allowed me to practice becoming me. Does that make sense? And sometimes that's what you need. You need to be far away from everybody who knows you in order to learn how to be yourself in a big world. That was New York. Yes?
Okay. After reading your first chapter, if you could go back in time and change what happened to your family, knowing you wouldn't be standing here in front of us, sharing your story today, would you?
It's such a good question. It's like you're giving me candy. You're opening up lots of potentials. If I could change the history of the Hmong people, if I could wake up the two who died so I could be here, I would. Why wouldn't I? The odds were in their favor. That one of those wouldn't be more intelligent, more thoughtful, write a better book for the world. Why not? Too many people died for me to be here. I can't stand here in front of you and say, because I'm here, things are the way they're supposed to be. If I could take away the refugee camps, then my mother wouldn't shake and wouldn't cry every time there's a miscarriage in the world. Because she wouldn't remember all those little baby boys lying in those hospital pants because they couldn't come to life with us. If I could take away those years, then maybe my father's heart would be stronger than it is today. I would in a heartbeat. Take back the bombs that the American government dropped onto Laos. Take away those craters from the earth. Let that jungle stand one more time, I would. If I could go to the high mountains of Laos and tell the French that we were not going to plant opium so that they could have money to fight some war somewhere else, I would. But all we have is this life that we have been given. All I have is 70 years to do good work, to live a life that would make those 2 others who died proud that I stand here, not as a memorial to them, but building the future that we were all hoping for, a more beautiful world, I would, in a heartbeat. Even if I could, because if I did that, I would never meet Aaron. I would never meet my 3 beautiful babies, and they're beautiful. I would never get to meet them. But who's to say that all of the other babies who died wouldn't be as beautiful? Because every single human being is loved. Every single human being deserves a chance at life. So many chances were eliminated in that war. So many scars remain open because of that war. But we live in a world that is creating more and more refugees all the time, not less. And that's important for all of us to remember. That the certainty with which we live our lives is a false sense of security. Who's to say that there wouldn't be a bomb and America would explode and all of us will all of a sudden have to be refugees somewhere looking to belong in a new language, in a foreign field, that we'd have to learn what to eat and how to drink. There is no guarantee in life. I am that existence. I'm that possibility, right? Because if life is just the way people think it's going to be, I wouldn't be here. Anybody else from the back? Is that a hand up? No? Okay.
Question from Washington Island.
Oh, Washington Island, yes.
So they are wondering, what is your earliest memory of coming to the United States, and where did you come into the country?
We came by way of San Francisco. So this is interesting. Most refugees, most immigrants in America come through Ellis Island, New York, right? For a lot of the Asians, we came in through the other shore, so we came in through California. My family flew through San Francisco, and then we came to Minneapolis, St. Paul. I was 6 years old and 6 months. I remember my first image of America, 2 people kissing. I'd never seen it before. In a lot of Southeast Asian cultures, when you love somebody, you sniff them in. They're scent, like babies. If you see a baby, people are sniffing. In Asia, I was used to people sniffing. But in America, people kiss and they rub surfaces, okay? And so I have a very clear memory of that. That my first impression of America. And then I remember the seasons. I come from a place where there were only rainy season, the dry season. And here, I remember all the trees falling down. And I thought it was the chemicals that the government were using to kill the people all over again. Because that's what happened to the Hmong after the Americans left. The government used chemicals to try to kill the people. And so all of the trees lost their leaves. I thought that was happening in autumn. I have very clear memories of the first snowfall. Only the pretty rich can afford snow and ice in Thailand, where it's really hot. And so I've never been able to really lick my fill of ice-cold snow. And in that first snowfall, I remember just sitting there with my mouth wide open, swallowing as much snow as I could. And I remember thinking very consciously, all of my classmates, they've seen snow forever. It's normal for them, right? But I'm never going to see it this way again. I have to remember it. And so I have all these very distinct and clear images of America. One of my first painful memories, and first, I think, self-determining memories from America was eat French toast sticks and sausage. I don't know if you all still get it, but in Minnesota, the students get French toast sticks, and then you get sausage patties, and you can dip them in syrup. Remember, I come from a place where we only got food 3 days a week. And so the ability to eat so much sugar and call it food was incredible. And I was, I was in first grade, and I was eating. And then I noticed that my whole table had stopped eating, and everybody was looking at me. And then I looked, and they were mimicking the way I was eating. It took me a while, but I figured it out. It was because I was eating with my mouth open. And they were all making fun of me, trying to teach me my manners in America, because here you're taught it's impolite to eat with your mouth open. When you're a poor kid from the refugee camps, all that matters is that you eat what's before you. And so I realized all these kids were laughing, and they were mimicking the way I was eating. But I'm stubborn, I say, so I wouldn't stop. So I continued to eat, except I was crying, so I couldn't, so I choked. And I remember this Hmong interpreter took me to the principal's office, and they asked me, "Why are you crying?" And I told them what happened. And the Hmong interpreter said, "In this country, you have to do things the way other people do them to survive." And that broke my heart. Because I had to say one more time that the way my mom and dad had raised me, the lessons that they taught me, weren't relevant to this new country that we were living in. And so that's one of my first early memories of being in school. But I also remember seeing a red reindeer sweater for the first time. The reindeer is a unique American creature, okay? You don't see reindeers I had never seen a reindeer before. And she had on this reindeer sweater, and she said, "Say your ABCs." And I said, "A, B, and C." And she said, "Say your ABCs." And I said, "A, B, and C," because that was all I knew. And then she shook her head sadly. I remember that. Within the first 6 months of my coming to America. Anybody else in this room? I have probably time for 2 more questions. Yes? Was it hard for my family to transfer to life in America? Yes. Because we were poor. Because when you come to America as refugees, and you all should know this if it's ever on a quiz somewhere, you come to America in debt because you have to buy one-way tickets to come here. So you borrow money from the American government, and you come, and immediately you have to kind of start paying them back, right, for your one-way airfares into the country. When you come to America from a refugee camp, you have nothing. And so all of the clothing that we got were from church basements. So they didn't fit because we were all super thin and super small. So all the shoes were too big, all the jackets were too big, you know. We couldn't afford window curtains. And so my mom and my aunts used to put bedding sheets on them. And the neighbors, a lot of white kids who didn't know what we were doing here, they would throw snowballs at our windows. And they would make fun of our clothing because it was all so big. When we first got to America, everybody in my family slept on milk crates. Do you all know milk crates? We put mattresses on top of milk crates. And I thought that's what all beds were like. Until one day, one of the girls from school came home, and she was so shocked at the way we were sleeping. And then I realized that the way we were living and the way we were sleeping wasn't the way everybody else was living and sleeping. But yeah, it was hard because we were poor. And when you have no money, it doesn't quite matter what color your skin is. You can't protect yourself from the laughter and other people's critiques. You can't buy a wall thick enough. You can't buy a car secure enough to hold you safe. So it was hard. But I think the hardest part for me was seeing my beautiful mother. She couldn't find, she didn't have the English skills. And so my mother had to work these heavy jobs. And she had to start wearing jeans and tennis shoes. And I used to see her pushing boxes alongside big men. Not looking left, not looking right, looking down. That was hard. It's still hard. Because that's not the life that they wanted for me, and why should it be her life? Because that wasn't the dream of America. That wasn't why so many people died to come here. And then because she was working those jobs, they only pay you according to what you can push. For her to look at that paycheck every 2 weeks before she could buy food for us at the table, that was hard. Christmas was Toys for Tots. Thanksgiving was Meals on Wheels. I could handle the poverty if I didn't have to see her. My beautiful mother, my bright mother, become less than what she was, less than what she could be for this world. And then my dad, who was so smart, with this beautiful voice, when he sang, other people cried in the Hmong community. All of a sudden in English, nobody wanted to hear the things he had to say. Nobody cared about the things he had to say. That was hard. America is not very kind to newcomers. America isn't very kind to people who don't know the language here. They're not very kind to little kids who can't afford car seats. So we're all squeezed in the back. They're not very kind. The laws are not kind. The people are not kind. Which is maybe why I come to schools like this. Maybe I'm the first Hmong person you've met, but I'm not going to be the only one. The next time you meet a Hmong person, you wouldn't know why they came here. You wouldn't know how far they have traveled. You wouldn't know how much they carry in their hearts for this dream of a place you know? Because so many of you, and maybe you don't remember, but your grandparents, your great-grandparents came from somewhere to call this place home too. But it doesn't take very long for people to forget. It doesn't take very long for people to get used to what's comfortable and what's convenient. But you're not going to be your greatest selves if you only make the decisions that are convenient, if you only do the things that are easy, if you're never uncomfortable. You're never going to realize what you can be and who you can be. You're never going to build the country that America needs to be. And so there are 1,000 reasons why I write, 1,000 reasons why I visit schools like this, 1,000 reasons why I put my tears and my heart on the line each and every time. Because I can do no less. Because there are so many teachers, men and women who have blonde hair and blue eyes, who told me, this kid who couldn't speak, that one day I would change the world. That in America, all you needed was one person to change the world. You didn't need everyone. Because of that man and that woman who taught me that I would become more than anybody else believed was possible. Too many people to let down. If I get afraid of the future, if I get afraid of all of you. So I keep on coming. I come into new spaces. And sometimes the kids are rude. And sometimes I have to fight to win their respect and fight to win their attention. But they don't know that I'm here for them as much as it is for me. Because we're in it together. Every country in the world is nothing more than a piece of land, people. Every line on a map was put there by someone's marker, by some money, some gun, somewhere. At the end of the day, we are just one big pot. If the fire stops burning, everything goes cold. And so I try to keep the flame alive. In my writing, in my speaking, in all the places and spaces I go, I try to keep the flame burning. Anybody else? One more thing. I'm going to give you one more opportunity. If you haven't said anything to me today, so that you can't go on social media and say that I was boring. You can't go on social media and said that I was a waste of your time, okay? No one? So I'm going to... A teacher. Yes, one teacher. Final question.
Have you traveled back to Laos at all?
I have. I just got back.
Oh, okay.
I almost didn't make it out because Laos is a communist government. They don't like the Hmong from America very much. So I went back not as an author, I went back as some teacher. I had to go back on a lie, and the whole time I was there, we were with a spy. He was our driver was a spy. So it was, I'm going to have to write it one day. It would be, it's an incredible story. But I have been back, and there are so many stories that are waiting for me.
When you went back, were you looking for family or just...
Yeah, my mom. My mom parted with her mother when she was just 16 years old. My grandma died in 1983, but my mother still has family there. So we took her back so she could be with her family one more time. It was incredibly heartbreaking. 43 years and they see her, and she was only 16, but now she's like 50-something, and they still call her little one. And they still love her the way she was when she was their little girl. They love her the way she was before the jungle, before the war, before the refugee camps, before the years in America. In their love, she became everything that they had hoped and dreamed she would be. And that, for me, was incredibly humbling. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with me. Thank your teachers, and thank this whole group for getting me here if I've been useful. If I have not, you can also blame them.